Welcome, everyone. Today we are looking at the evolution of financial intermediation theory, tracing the intellectual journey from information gaps to risk management to value creation, and showing how this thinking now shapes modern finance and the green transition. This BIOFIN-EU training tutorial is designed to help you understand why financial intermediaries exist, how scholars have explained their role over time, and what all of this means for financing nature-based solutions today. Our journey will move through 6 chapters. We will begin with the core concept of intermediation and ask why these institutions exist in theory at all. We will then examine 3 landmark contributions: Leland and Pyle's information-based view from 1977, Allen and Santomero's risk management shift in 1997, and Scholtens and Van Wensveen's value creation critique in 2003. From there, we will apply these frameworks to the green transition, and finally to the frontier challenge of intermediating nature-based solutions. Let's start with the basics. Financial intermediation is the process where institutional units take on liabilities in order to acquire financial assets. In other words, they channel funds from savers to borrowers. But here lies a paradox. In a perfect neoclassical Arrow-Debreu world, with no transaction costs and no information asymmetries, intermediaries would be entirely unnecessary. So why do they exist? 3 core rationales justify their presence in real, imperfect markets. First, they reduce transaction costs by exploiting economies of scale to lower search and contracting expenses. Second, they mitigate asymmetric information, solving both adverse selection, the problem before a contract is signed, and moral hazard, which arises after. And third, they transform assets, bridging savers' desire for liquidity with borrowers' need for long-term credit. This brings us to our first landmark paper, Leland and Pyle, published in the Journal of Finance in 1977. Their argument is foundational. Markets, they observed, are plagued by informational asymmetries. Borrowers always know more about the quality of their projects than lenders ever can. Individual savers simply cannot screen borrowers efficiently, which leaves them dangerously exposed to adverse selection. Intermediaries emerge as the solution to this gap. By acting as information specialists, they make lending viable. This paper became the foundational pillar of what we now call the traditional theory of financial intermediation. 2 decades later, Allen and Santomero, writing in 1997, identified a paradox that the traditional view could not explain. Technology had dramatically reduced transaction costs and informational asymmetries, yet the volume of financial intermediation had only continued to grow. If the traditional rationale were correct, intermediaries should have been shrinking. Instead, they were thriving. Allen and Santomero proposed 2 new core functions to explain this. First, risk management. Intermediaries are primarily facilitators of risk transfer and transformation, not just information screens. And second, participation costs. Individuals face high learning costs when dealing with complex instruments such as derivatives, and intermediaries lower the barrier to entry. Our third landmark contribution comes from Scholtens and Van Wensveen in 2003. Their critique is sharper still. Both prior theories, they argue, the traditional and the modern, are essentially static. They fail to capture the dynamic, value-creating nature of real-life intermediaries. The key insight here is that intermediaries don't just reduce risk, they actively absorb and transform it into products such as insurance contracts and diversified deposits, products that individual savers could never build for themselves. In short, risk itself becomes a product. To summarize the theoretical evolution at a glance, in 1977, Leland and Pyle saw intermediaries as fixers of information gaps. In 1997, Allen and Santomero recast them as managers of risk and participation costs. And by 2003, Scholtens and Van Wensveen redefined them as value creators, whose core business is risk transformation itself. With this theoretical foundation in place, let's see how each of these frameworks now applies to the most pressing challenge of our time, the green transition. The role of intermediaries is shifting from passive conduits of capital to active allocators of sustainable finance. As Scholtens and Van Wensveen reminded us, intermediation is dynamic. It absorbs and transforms risk into new products that savers cannot build alone. That same dynamic is now driving the financing of the green economy. Applying Leland and Pyle, we encounter a new kind of asymmetry: greenwashing. Just as borrowers once concealed project quality, they now have strong incentives to overstate environmental benefits. Intermediaries must therefore act as information verifiers, developing proprietary ESG scoring models to reduce search and verification costs for savers. Applying Allen and Santomero, we meet a new category of financial risk: transition risk. So-called brown activities, such as coal and oil, can lose value rapidly as regulation tightens, creating stranded assets. Allen and Santomero's focus on risk management becomes vital here. Intermediaries protect savers through hedging, diversification, and lowering participation costs. In practice, this means creating derivative products that allow firms to hedge against carbon price volatility, bundling complex and illiquid green projects into accessible retail funds, and gradually moving portfolios from concentrated, brown positions to green ones, positioned for the regulatory future. Finally, applying Scholtens and Van Wensveen, we see the most ambitious shift of all. Where traditional intermediation financed the extraction of natural resources, today's intermediaries are developing nature-based solutions, carbon credits and biodiversity offsets, that turn environmental risk into investable products. This is the ultimate expression of the value chain, transforming the risk of environmental collapse into a structured, bankable asset class. This frontier deserves a closer look. Nature-based solutions, or NBS, are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore ecosystems, while simultaneously addressing societal challenges: climate change, food security, water management, and delivering biodiversity benefits. But financing NBS has historically been difficult, and our three theoretical lenses help us understand why. Each barrier maps directly onto one of the frameworks we've discussed, and each demands a specific intermediary response. In practice, three requirements stand out. First, taxonomy and standards. Intermediaries must use frameworks, such as the EU taxonomy, to define what truly qualifies as green. Second, capacity building. They must develop in-house ecological expertise to evaluate nature-related risks and dependencies. And third, governance. They must collaborate with local communities to ensure projects are socially just and ecologically sound over the long term. The takeaway from this journey is clear. Financial intermediation is not static. It evolves. From fixing information gaps, to managing risk, to creating nature itself as an asset class, intermediaries remain the dynamic engine of capital allocation. And this leaves us with a question worth reflecting on. Considering the theoretical evolution we have traced, and the challenges in financing nature-based solutions. What are the most critical roles that financial intermediaries must play in order to redirect global capital toward a sustainable, nature-positive future? By the end of this lecture, you should be able to do the following. Understand why financial intermediaries exist and how their role has evolved in response to changing economic landscapes and challenges. Explain the three theoretical frameworks discussed today: Leland and Pyle in 1977, Allen and Santomero in 1997, and Scholtens and Van Wensveen in 2003. Evaluate how intermediaries create and add value within dynamic and evolving markets. Analyze the key barriers and potential solutions for financing nature-based solutions. And apply these theories to modern challenges, particularly in the context of green finance and the broader sustainability agenda. Thank you for your time today. If you have any questions or would like to learn more, please visit the BIOFIN-EU project website or reach out via email.
BIOFIN-EU